All right, welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Definitely. Always up for a good exploration.
Awesome. Well, today we're looking at something kind of unique, I think. Chapter 8 from the Christian edition of the Tao Te Ching.
Interesting. I'm intrigued already.
Yeah, it's not, your typical Sunday school material. This comes from the, what's it called? Built for Greatness, Built for God movement handbook, the BFG movement, as they shorten it.
BFG, okay, got it.
Yeah. And their whole thing is presenting, like, the gospel, but through this, what they call fresh expression of God's love, with this aim to, and they're pretty bold about it, to restore the truth.
Restore the truth, huh? That's a pretty big claim. So what stands out about this particular chapter, chapter 8?
Well, right off the bat, it's this image they use, comparing the highest goodness to, get this, water.
Water, that's just surprising, I guess. Well, I mean, it's everywhere. It's essential, but highest goodness.
Right. But that's what makes it so powerful as a metaphor, I think. Because, water just is. It nourishes everything around it without, even trying. Doesn't have to compete or fight or anything.
I see what you mean. It's just there doing its thing.
Exactly. And they highlight that, how it naturally settles in the lowest places, the spots everyone else kind of ignores.
Yeah.
And then, boom, comes this line. Therefore, it is like God.
Oh, okay. So they're equating those qualities of water, that quiet strength, giving life, humility. They're saying that's a reflection of the divine.
That's how I read it, yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes it, I don't know, a little less intimidating to think about, God in those terms, something we can actually grasp.
Makes it more tangible, yeah. So where do they go with this? What's the takeaway they want us to get?
So they build on this whole water metaphor to talk about renewal, right?
Yeah.
And they break that down into three main ideas: mindset, aim, and practice, which they call MAP, their Trinitarian method.
Trinitarian method, interesting. So they're connecting this renewal process to the Trinity somehow.
Yeah, that's the idea. So God's love is what shapes our mindset, how we think about things. Then, trust in the Son, that's what directs our aim, what we're striving for. And then faith in the Holy Spirit, that guides our practice, the actual doing part. It's all, like, interconnected.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. It's not just about changing our thoughts, but about aligning our actions with those thoughts as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there. The chapter also gets into this idea of respond, which is about how that interchange then affects, like, how we interact with the world around us.
So it's not just an internal thing. It's about taking that transformation and bringing it outwards.
Yeah, like our transformed spirit naturally leads to reaching out, having meaningful conversations, especially with people from different cultures or religions. The idea being that by, living out these principles, we can find that common ground.
Okay, so it's a holistic view, starting with ourselves and then expanding outwards. I like it.
Right, starts from the inside out. So let's dig into this renewal, starting with that first element, mindset. And the first one they highlight is mindset of humility and selflessness, which, ties back to that water metaphor.
Right, back to the water.
So the chapter says, the highest goodness is like water. It nourishes all things without striving. It stays in low places others avoid.
Okay, so in terms of mindset, what's the key takeaway here?
They're saying true significance, it doesn't come from power or status, but from serving others, putting their needs first. Not trying to be in the spotlight, but lifting others up in a quiet, humble way.
That's pretty countercultural, right? We're often told that being the best, being on top, that's what matters.
Definitely turns that idea on its head. So think about it. Where in your own life could you put someone else's needs before your own? Even in small ways, like offering to help a coworker, really listening when a friend's venting. They encourage us to really examine our thoughts, words, actions, and look for where we can be more humble.
And they even bring in Philippians 2.34 here, which talks about considering others more significant than ourselves, not just looking out for our own interests, but theirs too.
Exactly. Shows that it's not just a nice thought, but a core principle. So moving on to the next mindset, it's inner peace and stability. And this one comes from that line, therefore, it is like God.
Therefore, it is like God.
What are they getting at there?
The connection they're making is to God's unchanging nature, that sense of permanence, that rock-solid stability.
Okay, yeah.
So they're saying we should try to cultivate that same inner peace, that steadiness, especially when life gets crazy. Not getting swept away by every little thing.
Not letting the chaos outside dictate the peace inside.
Exactly. And they even suggest that we should try to be a source of peace ourselves, reflecting that divine calm. What does that look like for you?
For me, well, it's about actively doing things that ground me. Prayer, meditation, just being out in nature, whatever, helps me find that sense of calm, especially when I'm feeling stressed. Makes sense, like tapping into that underlying stability, that godlike peace, and then, being that calming presence for others.
Yeah, exactly. And they even bring up Philippians 4.67, which talks about bringing our anxieties to God through prayer, and in return, His peace will guard our hearts and minds.
It's a beautiful promise, isn't it? Okay, so the third mindset they talk about is deep compassion and love. And it comes from this line, in thinking, he loves with great depth.
In thinking, He loves with great depth. So, what are they saying about the nature of that love?
Well, it's not superficial. It's about approaching everyone, the whole world, with this deep sense of empathy, of really understanding.
Really trying to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. It's mirroring what they describe as God's love for us. Unconditional, caring deeply, and always wanting what's best for us.
So it's about looking past our own judgments, our own biases, and really trying to understand where others are coming from.
And that's not always easy, is it?
Definitely not. It takes effort, it takes practice.
So how do we actually put that deep compassion into action? What does it look like day to day?
Well, it's about actively listening to people, trying to understand their viewpoint without, jumping in with solutions or judgments. Letting our actions be guided by that love, even if it means stepping outside our comfort zone or, making a sacrifice to help someone.
It's about putting love into action.
Yeah.
And they actually connect this to 1 John 4.19, which says, we love because he first loved us.
A beautiful reminder of where that love originates.
Absolutely. Okay, building on this idea of love, the next mindset is generosity and kindness. And this one comes from the line, in giving, he shows great kindness.
In giving, He shows great kindness. What's the core concept there?
They're encouraging us to cultivate this spirit of abundance, of generosity in every area of our lives, like recognizing that everything we have, our time, resources, skills, are gifts. And that we're called to share those freely with kindness, no strings attached.
It's about shifting away from scarcity thinking, that feeling of not enough, and focusing on what we can give to others.
Exactly. So how can we really live out this generosity and kindness?
Well, it's about being on the lookout for those everyday opportunities to be kind, a helping hand, a kind word, offering your time to someone who needs it. Just being aware of the needs around us and responding with a generous spirit, being grateful for what we have.
It's those small acts that can make a big difference. And they actually tie this to Luke 6.38, which talks about giving generously and how it will be given back to you.
Okay, so generosity is its own reward. I like that.
All right, the fifth mindset is truth and integrity. And it's pretty straightforward. In words, he speaks truthfully.
In words, He speaks truthfully. So what are they focusing on here?
It's about having this deep commitment to honesty in everything we do, making sure our words match our actions, striving for that, transparency and integrity no matter the situation.
Yeah, especially in a world where it feels like truth is constantly being, manipulated or twisted. It's important to hold on to that.
Absolutely. So how can we actively work on this truth and integrity in our own lives?
Well, it's about practicing honesty even when it's hard. It's about making sure our yes means yes and our no means no. No deception, no manipulation, even in the little things.
It's about being someone whose word you can trust. And they connect this to Ephesians 4.25, which urges us to put away falsehood and speak truthfully to each other.
Solid advice, right? Okay, what's next?
The sixth mindset is justice and righteousness, and it's based on this line, in governing, he rules with justice.
In governing, He rules with justice. So is this just about our own personal behavior, or is it something bigger?
It's definitely bigger than just ourselves. It's about having this, core concern for fairness, for equity in the world, not just our own personal morality, but advocating for what's right, especially for those who are vulnerable or oppressed.
So it's call to action, to actually do something about injustice.
Exactly. So how can we put this into practice?
Well, it's about speaking out against injustice when we see it, whether it's at work, in our communities, or even in our personal relationships. Being a voice for the voiceless.
Standing up for what's right. And the scripture they reference here is Micah 6.8, which tells us to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God.
Always a good reminder.
Okay, so last but not least, we have the seventh mindset, which is faithfulness and reliability, based on this powerful statement. In action, he fulfills every promise in its time.
In action, He fulfills every promise in its time. That's a big one. What does that tell us about this mindset?
It's about being someone who keeps their word, someone others can truly count on, making sure our actions match our promises, being trustworthy in our commitments to others and to ourselves.
It's about having that integrity of character, that follow-through.
Exactly. So what are some tangible ways we can work on being more faithful and reliable?
It's about making a conscious effort to be reliable in all areas of our lives. Showing up on time, meeting deadlines, doing what we said we would do, following through on promises, big or small, in our relationships, work, everything.
It's about building that reputation of being someone who can be counted on. And they link this to 2 Corinthians 1:20, which reminds us that God's promises are yes in Christ.
So we should strive to be as dependable as God himself.
Exactly. So we've covered these 7 key mindsets for renewal. And, as we talked about earlier, the BFG handbook takes this a step further by linking each mindset to a specific aim, like taking that way of thinking and giving it a direction, a goal to work towards.
Right. It's about putting those mindsets into action.
So if we have a mindset of humility and selflessness, the natural aim is to aim for humility and selflessness. It's a constant reminder to put others first, to serve without needing recognition. And they bring back Philippians 2:3-4 here. The practical application remains focused on those everyday selfless acts.
It's about making humility a habit and an intentional part of our lives.
Exactly. And then, with a mindset of inner peace and stability, the aim is to aim for peace and stability, to actively seek and reflect that unwavering, divine peace, especially when things are chaotic around us.
Right. To stay grounded in the midst of the storm.
And John 14:27 is the guiding scripture here, where Jesus talks about leaving his peace with his followers. The application is still about grounding ourselves and being that source of calm for others.
It's about spreading that peace outwards.
Okay, so then we have the mindset of deep compassion and love, which leads to the aim for deep compassion and love. It's all about cultivating that genuine, unconditional love for everyone, even those who are difficult to love.
Because everyone deserves compassion, right?
Yeah.
Even those who challenge us.
Absolutely. And 1 John 4:19 is that central reminder here. And the practical step is about actively listening and showing empathy in our interactions.
It's about making compassion a verb, putting it into practice.
Right. So then the mindset of generosity and kindness naturally leads to the aim for generosity and kindness, giving freely without expecting anything in return.
It's about giving from the heart without any ulterior motives.
And Proverbs 11:25 supports this aim, talking about how the generous person prospers. The practical advice is to keep looking for those chances to serve, to be kind, every single day.
Making kindness a way of life.
Next, we have the mindset of truth and integrity, which goes hand in hand with the aim for truth and integrity. It's about making sure that what we say and what we do are aligned, being honest in all things.
Yeah, walking the talk.
Exactly. And Ephesians 4:25 is the key verse here. And the application is to really prioritize truthfulness in everything we do.
Honesty is the best policy, as they say.
All right, so the mindset of justice and righteousness connects to the aim for justice and righteousness. It's about fighting for fairness and equity in everything we do.
Standing up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Micah 6:8 is the guiding principle, and the practical step is to stand up for those who are marginalized, who are being treated unfairly.
Really an advocate for those who need it most.
And finally, the mindset of faithfulness and reliability goes with the aim for faithfulness and reliability. It's about being dependable, trustworthy, and trusting that things will happen in their right time.
It's about showing up for others and for ourselves.
And 2 Corinthians 1:20 reinforces this, and the real-world application is all about consistently following through on our commitments. So you can see how each aim flows directly from the mindset. It's a clear progression.
It's a roadmap for how to turn our intentions into actions.
Exactly. Which brings us to the last piece of their MAP framework, practice. So how do we move from just aiming for these qualities to actually living them out?
Right. How do we make it real?
Well, for each of those mindsets and aims, the handbook offers specific practices. So for humility and selflessness, the practice is about actively volunteering our time, helping our neighbors.
Yeah.
Philippians 2:34 is the foundation here. It's about taking those selfless intentions and turning them into tangible actions.
Putting our good intentions into practice, literally.
Exactly. And for deep compassion and love, they suggest intentionally reaching out to those in need, really listening when others are speaking.
Being present, being there for people.
And that connects to 1 John 4:7, which encourages us to love one another. It's about translating those feelings of empathy into concrete actions.
Showing love through action.
When it comes to generosity and kindness, the practice is about donating our time or resources, offering practical help to those around us.
Giving what we can, however we can.
And they take inspiration from Acts 20.35, which talks about the blessing that comes from giving. It's about making those tangible contributions to the well-being of others.
Making a difference in the world.
For truthfulness and integrity, the practice is about consciously speaking the truth, avoiding gossip or spreading rumors, and taking responsibility for our mistakes.
Owning up to our shortcomings, being accountable.
And Ephesians 4.25 is the guiding principle there. It's about actively choosing honesty in our communication and in our actions.
Integrity in everything we do.
Now, for justice and fairness, the practice is about actively advocating for the oppressed, supporting social justice initiatives in our communities.
Working towards a more just world.
And that's inspired by Isaiah 1.17, which calls us to seek justice and defend the oppressed. It's about actively working to create a more equitable world.
It's a big task, but every little bit helps.
Absolutely. And finally, faithfulness and dependability are practiced by consistently following through on our commitments, being someone others can rely on.
Being that solid rock for people.
And 2 Corinthians 1.20 is the anchor here. It's about building that reputation of trustworthiness through our actions, big and small. So you can really see how each practice is a very direct way to embody the mindset and achieve the aim.
It's a clear path, a practical guide for how to live these principles.
Exactly. Now, remember how we talked about how the chapter emphasizes responding to the world around us? This section is really interesting because it starts to connect these individual virtues we've been talking about to a broader, understanding across different faiths.
Oh, interesting. So they're not just keeping it within a Christian framework.
Nope. For each of those 7 principles, they actually include parallel teachings from Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So they're showing how these ideas resonate across different traditions.
Exactly. So let's take humility and selflessness as an example. We see the Christian teaching of being a servant alongside the Buddhist emphasis on selfless right action, the Hindu teaching in the Bhagavad Gita about acting without attachment to results, and the Islamic principle that the most honored are the most righteous.
So even though the language might be different, the core idea is the same.
Right. It shows how these aren't just isolated ideas within one religion. They're like universal human principles.
Makes you think, doesn't it? So what do they say about how this unites us?
Well, they point out that qualities like humility and selflessness, they naturally promote compassion. They help us get over our egos and foster a sense of unity that can, go beyond those cultural and religious divides.
It's about focusing on what we share rather than what separates us.
And the practical step they suggest is to just practice selflessness in our everyday interactions. They bring in Matthew 20.28 as the Christian reference point.
Small acts of service can go a long way.
Absolutely. Okay, they follow the same pattern for all 7 principles. For peace and calmness, we have the Christian idea of peacemakers being blessed, alongside Buddhist mindfulness and meditation practices, the Hindu emphasis on maintaining a balanced mind, and the Islamic focus on purification and inner peace.
So it's about cultivating peace both within ourselves and in the world around us.
Right. And the common thread is this pursuit of peace, both internal and external, and the practical application, choosing peaceful responses when we're faced with conflict.
Turning away from aggression and towards understanding.
Exactly. Now, for deep compassion and love, they highlight the Christian call to love our neighbor as ourselves, alongside the Buddhist concept of metta, or loving kindness, Hindu teachings on compassion, and the Islamic emphasis on mercy and compassion for all creation.
So it's about extending that love beyond ourselves to everyone and everything.
The uniting thread here is that idea of unconditional love. And the practical step is actively showing empathy and kindness in our actions.
Making love a guiding principle in our lives.
Okay, for generosity and kindness, we have the Christian principle of giving freely, the Buddhist practice of dina, or generosity, Hindu traditions of charity and selfless service, and Islamic teachings on caring for the needy.
So generosity takes many forms across these traditions.
Yeah, and the shared understanding here is that generosity strengthens communities, builds goodwill. And the practical step, actively give our resources, whether that's time or money.
Contributing to the well-being of others.
Now, for truth and integrity, they point to the Christian idea of truth setting us free, the Buddhist principle of right speech, the Hindu concept of satya, or truthfulness as a key virtue, and Islamic warnings against mixing truth with falsehood.
So truth is a foundational principle in all of these traditions.
Yeah, the common ground is the vital role of truth in building trust and fostering healthy relationships. And the application, being honest in all our interactions, even when it's tough.
Honesty, even when it's hard, is essential for building trust.
Absolutely. Now, for justice and righteousness, we have the Christian call to defend the weak and oppressed, the Buddhist principle of right action, the Hindu concept of dharma, which includes upholding social order, and Islamic commands to judge fairly and stand up for justice.
So it's about creating a just and equitable world where everyone is treated fairly.
And the unifying theme is this pursuit of just and equitable societies. The practical step is advocating for fairness and equality in whatever sphere of influence we have.
Making a difference in our own little corner of the world.
Okay, last one. For faithfulness and dependability, there's the Christian teaching of letting our yes be yes and our no be no, the Buddhist emphasis on ethical conduct and being reliable, the Hindu focus on fulfilling one's duty with integrity, and Islamic commands to fulfill covenants and be true to our word.
So it's about being true to our word, to ourselves and to others.
The common thread is the importance of building trust through integrity and dependability. And the application. Reliably follow through on our commitments in all areas of our lives.
Being someone people can trust.
It really is amazing to see these common threads running through such different spiritual traditions.
Yeah, it emphasizes that potential for finding common ground, building understanding.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. We started with that image of water representing the highest good and how this chapter connects that to the very nature of God.
And we explored those key principles: humility, selflessness, peace, love, generosity, truth, justice, and faithfulness. All presented through this framework of mindset, aim, and practice, this roadmap for personal renewal.
And I think most importantly, we've seen how those principles resonate across different faith traditions, which really points to that deep interconnectedness we all share.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not as different as we might think.
So, a final thought for you to consider. How could you bring even just one of these master-servant qualities into your life in a more deliberate way? What small change could you make in your mindset, your aims, or your practices? And what would happen if a lot of us chose to embrace this way? What kind of impact could that have on our communities and the world around us? It's something to think about.
It's a challenge, but a worthwhile one.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.